All right, you made it to the very last video of this lecture on which we will talk about how we can make our agriculture food production better to reduce the environmental impact and be more sustainable. And so I'm really glad that you've made it. I know it has been quite a long lecture on this one. There is a lot, in fact, to say about this food system. And so without spending too much more time, let's go into it and look at a small video to introduce you on the changes that needs to be done versus what in fact has been kind of promoted over the recent year, the promotion of industrialized agriculture, the need of it to feed our population, etc. And in fact, talking about why we have other ways we should be going to other ways.
The world's population keeps growing. By 2050, we'll have to double our food production. For that, we'll need genetic engineering, advanced pesticides, and fertilizer. Lots of fertilizer. That's why at Agricon, we're working every day, hand in hand with farmers and their families. And don't you want to feed the world?
Messages like this one seem to be popping up everywhere, but who's really behind them? Turns out it's the corporations profiting from this way of farming, like those selling the pesticides, fertilizers, and chemicals. They're spending billions to warn us that their way is the only way, with industry groups like the Alliance to Feed the Future, whose members include the Association for Dressings and Sauces and the National Frozen Pizza Institute. But ask farmers who really know how to feed us, and you'll get a very different story. A heartbreaking and hopeful story that I've heard talking to hundreds of families like this one. 50 years of this myth and the lobbying dollars to support it have tilted the playing field to favor corporate-controlled chemical agriculture, giving farmers little or no support for any other path. So it's easy to understand a lot of farmers feel it's either get on board or get out. Getting on board means farmers stop practices that keep soil healthy and go for single crops. Livestock that used to be raised on the farm get crammed into polluting factories. To keep this unnatural system going, these farmers now buy expensive inputs, all from ever fewer corporations demanding ever-rising prices. It's a quick addiction. Pests become resistant, so you've got to use more chemicals. Livestock becomes sicker, so you've got to use more drugs. Soil loses its natural fertility, so you've got to use more chemical fertilizer. Then on the other side, when farmers try to sell their crops, they face only a few big buyers offering unpredictable prices. The economics don't work for long. Over the last 50 years, millions of desperate farmers have had to sign contracts with corporations that dictate their every move, or have lost their farms altogether. More and more farm income is concentrating at the top, so now only 1 in 10 US farms can support a family. In many other countries, a similar thing is happening. Small farmers who buy into the promise that corporate agriculture is the solution often get trapped by debt and dependency. So yes, corporate agriculture is good for some folks, including some of the largest growers, but not the typical farm family. And that's strike one for this myth. But we have to feed the world, right? And if not this way, what choice do we have? A great one. We just don't see ads for it, and it certainly isn't getting the subsidies going to corporate ags. State-of-the-art sustainable farming ends this unnatural chemical addiction. It uses better practices, not ever more expensive purchases. Sustainable farmers build healthy soil by planting a variety of crops and rotating them. They raise their animals on the farm, not in cramped factories. They fertilize using compost and livestock or planting soil-nourishing crops. Healthier plants with good crop rotation also help keep pests in check without hurting the bugs we need, like those all-important pollinators. How does this choice impact everyone else? Massively. Industrial farms degrade and erode precious topsoil. 64 tons per acre are being lost every year in some spots in our heartland. They suck up huge amounts of water, a lot of it from deep underground, essentially irreplaceable. And they use millions of pounds of antibiotics, a practice that leads to dangerous new bacteria. They also produce toxic runoff that pollutes our rivers, our oceans, and us. The average American already has at least 13 pesticides in our bodies. And thanks to chemicals in the field, farmers and farm workers have higher rates of many cancers. So the sustainable farm is better for farmers and the environment. But can it really feed the world? Study after study is saying yes. Sustainable farms produce as well, and in drought years, even better. This is important.
All right, and I cut the video, but I invite you to follow the rest of this video again on CAT courses if you're interested. Be careful. I would suggest you to watch those videos just for your curiosity, and sometimes a question may pop up regarding one of those videos in the quiz. So you want to be aware, and they provide you information that makes, in fact, more robust, in fact, your learning. You have watched in a lecture prep, the last lecture prep, number 4, that you prepared for this class, was about the 5-step plan to solve our food system production. And so going quickly over each of them to end up this lecture, I'm listing them by number 1 being freezing the agricultural footprint, meaning that we don't need to grow more crops. We already have what we need in terms of land. Then we need to be able to grow more on what we have in terms of the farming that we do have. That sounds very more like industrialized agriculture, but no, you'll see it's different. Then resources more, using the resources more efficiently, more sustainably in terms of water, fertilizers, pesticides. We need to be more sustainable. On our side, we can shift our diet, make a slight change in our diet that will help reducing the production of food and make it more adequate. And finally, reducing our waste. So quickly, freezing the footprint, I will take the example of marine protected areas, which in fact forbidden some places in our ocean to be fished, mostly close to coastal region. That restricting any human activities to allow in those parts fish to have an habitat, to have a place to reproduce, to potentially enhance the growth of the biodiversity in that part of the ocean, and allow the fish after to move to other places where it will be fished. It's very much like the hotspot. It's only concerning a small portion of the ocean. We're talking about 5% of the ocean water to be protected areas. But that has been successful over every time we introduce one. Between 2 to 4 years, we've seen again an increase in the biodiversity and an increase in the health of the ecosystem. It's moving to bigger fish in itself, more species coming back, and of course, an increase in our fishing and our fish production. So just by allowing some pockets to be protected, that has good impact on the environment. So we needed some way to think about this way, not just considering everything to be a potential site of pollution, but by also allowing some pockets of being protected. Growing more on what we have, as I mentioned, looks a lot like industrialized farming, but we can do it another way by going back to what our ancestors have done for so long before us, by applying organic farming, which means going back to polyculture, meaning a lot of different crops of growing, using technique that was used in the past, relying on, for example, compost that we can see. Compost will be taken from all the waste that we are not using, the green waste, but also the waste from the animals, the manure and so on, can be used in our compost as a fertilizers. We can rotate the crops, moving, using one land for specific crops and switching during the year, which allow the exchange of nutrients, avoid the soil to be depleted. We can use some specific vegetable that we know or crop that will be fixing some of those nutrients, such as nitrogen fixing legumes. There is a lot of practice that we've stopped because, of course, they tend to be less efficient money-wise, but in terms of sustainability and thinking about the future of our soil, this is very much more efficient. We can minimize the pest not by using pesticides, but through the crop rotation, by using beneficial insects. We know that some insects are pretty good to hunt other ones, such as the ladybugs with aphids. We can also use a mix between plants that will be, in fact, fighting what we call companion planting, will be fighting the plants. And so with all of that, it's providing, it will provide to your soil the nutrients it needs. It will reduce the amount of pests, the amount of insects, the amount of disease within the plants. We don't need that much fertilizers to improve the quality of the soil and the quality of our food production. It will have good effect on decreasing the impact on global warming at this point, on reducing water pollution, as I mentioned, limiting the amount of fertilizer being needed, the energy use, and the water consumption. So it has a lot of good sides. We know about it, but of course, big corporations don't look at that because it's making less money. But it's not about just making money, it's about making our world sustainable in itself and making sure that our future generation will have the land to be growing the food, that if we apply those practices now, we can assure that will happen. Organic farming is, of course, something to be careful of in terms of, when you make your groceries and go into to buy the organic food in case, because, well, there is some miscommunication. First, not everything that is non-GMO can be organic. Organic is in some way the best way because, as you see, it doesn't have GMOs, it doesn't have pollutants. It is also making sure that animals are well treated during the process. I mean, it's assuring a good quality of agriculture. Non-GMOs just mean that they are what you're eating hasn't been modified genetically, but anything else, it doesn't make sure about it. However, there is a big downside of it, the price. And that's why, oh, my bad. That's why also organic food tend to be limited to only a portion of the population who can afford about it, because it's at least twice the price of non-organic food. And so it has a heavy toll. But if we can generalize this organic agriculture, we can reduce the amount of the price also of the product being made. Then point number 4 is shifting our diet. We also, of course, all crave for the good stuff in our mouth, but we know that usually tend to not be the good stuff for our body. We all would prefer a bagel versus maybe a sandwich or a granola. But the system count points, I think it's from Weight Watchers, and it shows you how bad this can impact on your body, with a heavy toll for the bagel, less on the sandwich, and less from the granola. We know what we should be eating. It's more difficult to apply it. A big portion should be vegetables and fruits. Half of your plate should be about that. And then some cereals and some proteins, mostly. We've seen that with this graph, we see that in general, for the majority of the type of food we need, we tend to be below the recommendation, especially for vegetables, dairies, and fruits in itself. We have increased our consumption of grains, but we are over it, and the same with meat, eggs, and nuts, we tend to be over it. So there is a disconnection, not a disconnection, but a disparity between what we are eating and what we should be eating. And also the emission, the impact in some way, ecological impact, just based on the emission of CO2 from the diet is different. If we see a vegan or vegetarian person will have a lower emission of greenhouse gases versus someone who eats meat almost at every meal, which is logical. We saw the heavy impact of meat in terms of greenhouse gases a couple of slides ago in the previous video. So your sheep diet has a definitely big impact on the environment, and that's something we can easily change ourselves. I was mentioning that also, I mean, in the impacts of the marine environment, the way we're fishing tend to be essential. And so, of course, bottom trawling is heavily intense, leading to products such as this one, which on the market tend to be cheap. It would be better to go to something a bit more selective, avoiding a lot of bycatching and avoiding the loss of biodiversity and promoting this type of product. But the prime is the price. This is about the price of each can, $1 for one, almost $4 for the other one. Do you need to be eating tuna fish every day at every meal? No. So maybe it may be worth it, I know, to go for something like that once every 2 weeks or so, versus something like that. In terms of quality also, your body will say thank you. But again, I understand it's 3 times more expensive because, well, it's promoting a healthier way. So there is this limitation about the public that the good stuff, the more sustainable stuff for the planet, but also for you, tend to be the most expensive. Are we all agree to go for this way? It's difficult. We need also to be fighting against those food deserts, which are places where people do have to drive a lot to get access to good food. they have potentially fast food and and unhealthy access food very easily, maybe on the next 5 minutes walk, but good healthy food, let's say store with fruits, vegetables, and good quality meat and so on, is further away, making them more likely to not buy this likely food and to be dealing with unhealthy food, which leads to a lot of issues about the diet, leading to potential obesity and a lot of health issues that cost a lot of money. $71 billion is estimated to be wasted because of this food desert that give a bad lifestyle to most of our citizens. It's estimated that at least and that was 10 years ago, 2.3 million of Americans were living in food deserts, and that's representing a big portion. Most of the big cities have a food desert in all the US. So that's something to fight. And a way to fight it is by developing a better distribution system, where we do have food hubs, for example, places that will collect and redistribute the food to other places more locally where people can buy. So trying to distribute better the access to food. Then developing more farmers market, which happens in a lot of places, to in fact connect the consumers, us, with the producers, the farmers, and also making sure that we are buying local. One of the last one is developing the CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, where through a system of subscription, you pay maybe $30 a month, or I don't know exactly the price, to be honest. I'm not part of it, but you're in fact you're supporting a farmer, and this farmer in return will provide you some of his product for you to eat. And it's allowing you to discover new product, to eat something, to eat food, seasonal food, and again, to eat local and support a more sustainable type of food production. So there are a lot of ways to improve the diet of the people and to reduce these food deserts and to make sure that people have healthier habits. The last one, reducing our food waste. We need to be making sure to follow those type of loop of planning ahead, the type of food we want, buying what only we need, storing efficiently, cooking the right amount, eat what you can, and the leftovers, and recycling or giving away what you may be not eating. The idea is by reducing the amount of food, you're avoiding the amount of the waste being produced to the landfill. In this video of Oliver, I forgot his name, sorry for that, he's mentioning that it's producing methane, which is a heavy greenhouse gas, is participating in global warming. So if you avoid most of the food to go to the landfill, you avoid that huge impact on the climate. And so it is something that is relying a lot on us because we are the main source of food waste in itself. See from those data, mostly manufacturing grocery stores do not throw food, restaurants a bit more, and that depends on the source. In fact, this is a very high number. Most of the time, restaurants tend to be in lower number estimate, but us, residential, we can make a better change regarding that, okay? So we have directly some actions we can do to make a change. It's not about only big corporation. It's not about just the government. We as individuals can make a change through our diets and through our habit and consumption. All right. With that, we are done with the food system chapter, and I wish you a good rest of your day, and I'll see you soon for our next chapter. Bye, everyone.